Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a while since we talked about the silent recording machine, the PC that we use in the studio. So let's do a 2017 update because I've got some new equipment to go in it. Things have changed in there slightly since it was built, so let's change it again and we'll do it on camera. So as time's gone on, the studio setup has expanded somewhat. So as you can see behind me, there are now actually 3 screens behind me, and there's a TV over there as well, which I'll do a pan shot of, and they all work off the computer separately. So where I was using the onboard graphics, which can only do 2 screens, I switched to using an Nvidia Geforce 750 Ti, which is a great little graphics card, but it's not silent, it's not fanless, it's not very loud, but it's loud enough that it kind of negates the entire point. So that was only ever intended as a stopgap. I had that around, so I stuck that in. And I'm starting to find, now that I've gone up to 3 screens plus TV, the TV is plugged into the Intel graphics system, and the 3 monitors are plugged into the GeForce system, and it's causing some issues. It's causing kind of latency problems where I can't get the latency down on the RME radar as low as I could, probably because of some sort of processor interrupt. So the GeForces are great and all, but I decided to have a look, what if I used an Nvidia Quadro card? Now this is what I got. This is an Nvidia Quadro NVS 450. Now this thing has 4 DisplayPort outputs and is entirely passive, is entirely silent. It's not the most powerful card in the world, but hopefully between the really stable drivers that Nvidia make for their Quadro line, and the fact that it's silent and it's designed to do lots and lots of outputs. Hopefully this will take away any of the issues that I was having. Now before you say it, oh Quadro, we can't afford Quadro, this is not the latest line of Quadro cards. I think this is a generation old, and the NVS cards were never designed for high performance. This is just designed for multiple screen outputs, which for audio guys should be great, and we'll soon find out, because the one thing that I do sometimes is I do live streams from the machine, and we're going to have to see how that handles, because that might be the sticking point. But I got this off eBay for about £25. I had to get a couple of adapters as well, because they're all DisplayPort outs, and I'm guessing most of your monitors, or my monitors as well, won't all be DisplayPort. In fact, none of mine are. So the TV already has a DisplayPort to HDMI cable attached to it. One of these 2 screens has the same, DisplayPort to HDMI cable. This in my hand is a DisplayPort to HDMI adapter, and this that I got was a DisplayPort to DVI adapter, because the very left screen that I have is DVI only. So I just figured, hey, rather than get a DisplayPort to HDMI, then an HDMI to DVI and just go silly, why not just keep it simple and do that? So that is what I have did. So the interesting thing is this quad graphics beast of a card that's silent, and the 2 adapters, which are about £3 each, cost me about £70 less than a mid-range fanless graphics card. So the only thing left to find out is it stable, and does it work for what I want it to work for? Let's find out. Okay, so as you can see, I've cracked the torch out just so I can show you around the back. One thing that I did when I built this is I spent a bit of extra money on making sure the cables were longer than I needed, so I could slide this entire rack mount case out and everything would stay connected. So in fact the system's even still powered on, so I better turn it off at the switch. Let's let the light fade away there. Now one thing, once the power's drained in, there we go, it does take a few seconds. I like to leave the power plugged in because it's earthed, it's grounded, and that means that if I touch the case, I also have been grounded. There's no power going through it right now, but there is that ground. Now, before I turned it off, I cut the camera. I used the display driver uninstaller from Guru 3D. Now, as you can see, this has changed a little. This GeForce GTX 750 Ti, in fact, it's not even a 750, it's a Ti model, was installed so that I could have extra screens. I had this available to me from another computer which I was going to use for streaming, and I've actually done most of the streaming. I always do that. Done most of the streaming straight from this machine, because having multiple monitor outputs, oh yeah, helps when you unplug all your graphics, idiot. Yeah, all your multiple outputs. It's very difficult to then send them out to separate capture cards unless you spend a lot more money. And also, this board is new. This is the word clock timecode option for the RME radar. So these two, that's the radar together. So that's 32 channels in, 32 channels out, or even more, I believe, for all the tasty audio goodness over ADAT, which is up in the rack. But this is an extra one which gives me the word clock and time code, which means I can now sync more devices to it than just ADAT. Now let's bring in the Quadro. As you can see, it's got 4 inputs. They're actually labelled 1, 4, 2, 3. They're out of order because this is actually 2 graphics processors in one, apparently. It's got 2 complete chipsets. So that's why I uninstalled the GeForce drivers, because I'm going to turn this on in safe mode. That's really opened the case up. I've actually got a lot more space to work with now. That's cool. I was going to put it in the PCI Express 16x1 slot, but it looks like it gets dangerously close to the metal on the back of it touching the copper on this no-fan CPU cooler. Luckily, I picked a motherboard that has several PCIe Express x16 slots, and I don't need this PCIe power connector anymore either, so that's going to go back, because it's a modular power supply. I can tidy up by just removing it and put that back in the box for the power supply. Okay, so after some troubleshooting, there's always troubleshooting in these situations, turns out that the Intel graphics card was still on and was screen number 1, which meant that when I turned the whole system on, I couldn't see a damn thing. So now that that's sorted, the results are in and it works. Good news and bad news. The good news is that the latency is now back to as it should be. That if I've got a full mix with one that I've tested has 139 plugins in, including virtual tape from Slate, virtual mix rack on every channel, Slate's FGX, Ozone, K-Clip, the works. And at 128 sample latency, no problem, no bother, it's fine. And I can even record tracks on the fly at the same time in that project, even with every plugin turned on. Great, that's how it should be. And at 64 samples of latency, I can run quite a light mix with almost no fallback latency at all. And that's how it always should have been, except that I've been adding more and more screens. The bad news is that streaming is pretty much out. It turns out that the graphics cards, well, the graphics chips on there, not very powerful for the kind of 3D engine and stuff that XSplit uses, which means that it's going to be capture card time. I have a second machine in here which I was originally using for streaming. It seemed a little bit silly, but now that I've got the latency down so low on here, I don't want to lose that, so I'm probably going to get something like a Blackmagic capture card and an HDMI splitter and use a second computer to do the streaming from, and then just have a dedicated audio machine and a dedicated stream machine, so that when I'm not doing streaming, that computer which does make noise will be off, so I'll be able to mix in total silence, and then when the streaming computer's on, yes, there'll be some noise in the room, but at least it'll be for a reason. And it will be kind of limited bursts whilst on stream talking about the finer points of mixing rather than going for that kind of ultimate zen silence. Which in here, the only noise there is in here right now is the camera. The camera has a little fan in it. That's the only noise in here. As soon as the camera's cut, we're back to dead silent again. And this thing can handle any mix I throw at it, and we are good. Yeah, it turns out that I didn't have one extra DisplayPort adapter for the TV, which I'm going to have to buy, so that's another £3. Ooh. And that's it. And I'll have 4 screens running off one graphics card and no impact on the latency at all. So there we go. Let me know if you try something similar, because this really didn't cost me very much at all and actually cost me less than the original plan, which was to buy the GeForce 1050 Ti Calmex, the silent one, which is over £100. And I think that can run 3 screens and this setup can run 4. So I win. Thanks for watching, and hit the like button if you found this useful. Share this if you know any other producers who are looking for a crazy screen situation, or at least a low latency situation on a budget. Thanks for watching. I'm Adam Steele for the Hot Pole Studios, and I'll see you in the next video.